300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on JJ Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad to have you with us on a Monday morning. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about, not only in the NFL, but in the NBA. The Colorado Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup, Ole Miss winning the Men's College World Series. I'm going to touch on all of that, but I have to start off with an NFL topic because obviously we are approaching the start of training camp. It hasn't begun officially. It starts at the end of July, but there are some interesting storylines to keep track of. And I think that one of the most important ones to take a look at is with the Cleveland Browns and obviously their quarterback situation because Deshaun Watson right now, the NFL is pushing to suspend Deshaun Watson indefinitely. We all know that, because of the allegations of sexual misconduct filed by, at the time, it was 24 different women. Now 20 of those suits have been settled, 4 remain, and he's having official hearings on Tuesday. So the Browns are in this situation where who do they start at quarterback to begin the year? And really what we should expect to be the entire season. They signed Jacoby Brissett in the offseason, and by all indications, the Browns have come out and said that they are likely to roll with Jacoby Brissett and not Baker Mayfield as the starting quarterback if Deshaun Watson gets suspended. Now, here is the dilemma for the Cleveland Browns. The problem for the Cleveland Browns is this is a roster that is built to contend now. It's constructed to win now. They're not building for the future. When you've got players like Nick Chubb, who was second in the NFL in rushing yards last year, and Kareem Hunt, and the talent and the depth of talent that they have on that roster, you can't afford to add one more additional year of tread on those tires. That's first of all. So this team is built to win right now, and not to mention they're competing in a loaded AFC and specifically AFC North division. When you've got a team like the Cincinnati Bengals who just won the division last year, who reached the Super Bowl. The Ravens were 8-3 last year with Lamar, who was healthy at the time before he ended up getting injured and he contracted COVID. And that was the rest of that season for the Ravens. They began the year 8-3. They were absolutely sensational. And the Steelers, listen, obviously they're not nearly as highly touted as they've been in the past. Ben Roethlisberger just retired. But this is still a Mike Tomlin-led Pittsburgh Steelers team that you know is going to be well coached. They're going to be disciplined. They're not going to make many mistakes. And though they might be limited offensively, they're going to compete, and they're going to give you a game. So there are no easy victories, obviously, in that division. And then, of course, in the actual AFC, you can look at all 4 teams in the AFC West just as a start with the Chiefs and the Raiders and the Broncos and the Chargers. You've got the Bills. You got the Patriots. Who knows what Miami, how they're going to look with Tua, and they traded for Hill. So the AFC is absolutely stacked. So the Browns aren't in a position where they just want to simply waste away a season. And right now, here's the problem. Mayfield is technically still on the roster. He's technically a viable option to be the starting quarterback, but obviously he has no intention of playing for the Browns, given the fact that, well, they traded for Deshaun Watson. They went behind his back, and he feels betrayed. And he feels like the bridge has been burned. There is no longer any trust there. But the problem for the Browns is, yes, you brought in a capable backup in Jacoby Brissett, who's in his sixth season or in 6 years in the NFL. He has started 37 games. He is 14-23 as the starting quarterback in his NFL playing career. So he's the perfect kind of leak patch to just patch things up well enough where the ship doesn't sink, but he's not good enough to necessarily buoy and carry this type of team or really carry any franchise. And that's not a knock on Jacoby Brissett. There are only a handful of guys in the NFL who are good enough at the quarterback position to be able to do that. I don't even think there are 20. Maybe there are 15 guys that are capable of doing it. So it's not any form of disrespect to say that about Jacoby Brissett. That's just the reality of the situation. And so with that in mind, I think there is a lot of irony and potential for poetic justice here, because the irony is, as much animosity as Baker Mayfield probably harbors towards the Cleveland Browns organization, and as much as he feels like he's been betrayed and there's a lack of trust and support between he and the organization, and all this hostility that he probably harbors and that's pumping through his veins, the irony is this may be a golden opportunity for him to transform his image and redefine who he is and redefine how the rest of his NFL playing career will unfold. Because last year, he was battling, obviously, a litany and a multitude of injuries that made him look like a shell of himself. To his credit, he never publicly complained. He never publicly made any excuses about the injuries. He just went out and he performed at the best of his ability. But we know he was dealing with a torn labrum in his shoulder basically since the second week of the season, among a slew of other things. And yet, despite that, what we know is a healthy Baker Mayfield would truthfully be the better option as the starting quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. That's the reality, because he's a more talented individual player than Jacoby Brissett. This was the number one pick in the draft in Baker Mayfield. So he would be the better option, and perhaps both sides can come to a compromise. Perhaps they can each sit down and Baker will be like, hey, okay, I'll be willing to play for your organization, for the Browns organization, under my fifth and final rookie contract, a year in my rookie contract. And in exchange, perhaps the Browns can kind of cater to Baker a little bit. Maybe they can make more accommodations, maybe make more accommodations with his family, with some access, who knows, whatever those potentials are. Perhaps that's how the two can hash this out, because I do think that it works out for both sides. And what a story it would be if Baker Mayfield could come back and lead the Browns to a Super Bowl, because they have the roster to do it, to go from a once castaway, lame duck quarterback to now the savior, to the guy who can come in and resurrect not only his career, but the franchise, almost this type of redemptive story, this kind of Shawshank Redemption. It would be beautiful to watch. And I think that he is liked within that locker room amongst the players. I know that he liked the guys on the team. I think he's well liked enough to the point where they would rally around him for one more year, that they would buy into him for one more year. Again, do I see this necessarily playing out? No, I don't think that he has any intention of playing for the Browns organization ever again. But I'm just looking at this roster, and you're taking a look at the talent that they have. One of the best backfields in the NFL, as I mentioned, with Chubb and Kareem Hunt. You just traded for Amari Cooper at the wide receiver position. Yes, you lost Jarvis Landry, but you still have Donovan Peoples-Jones. You still have David Njoku at the tight end position, one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in the NFL. Elite defensive players. Myles Garrett has already won Defensive Player of the Year before. You still have Jadeveon Clowney. You've got playmakers in the secondary with Denzel Ward and John Johnson III. Kevin Stefanski is a hell of a coach. I think he's proving to be one of the up-and-coming bright minds in the NFL. This is a really, really good roster. And again, I see Brissett likely being the starting quarterback, but personally, if I'm the Browns, I'd much rather have Baker Mayfield be the starting quarterback. And I think that even for Baker, if he can, again, manage to set aside his personal feelings about the Browns organization, it could be a win-win. Again, I don't expect it to happen, but man, what a story that would be if Baker could take over. So I want to transition to the NBA for a second, because this is another developing story that I think is interesting to keep an eye on. Bradley Beal and the Washington Wizards. Obviously, we are getting close to the start of free agency in the NBA. There are a lot of guys that always feel like we've been keeping tabs on for several years. And Bradley Beal has always been one of those guys that we've monitored every single offseason to see what his satisfaction level is with the situation he's in Washington, D.C. And as of right now, he is expected to decline his $36.4 million player option and re-sign with the Wizards on a 5-year Supermax deal that would pay him about $248 million, give or take, depending on what the cap situation, how much cap room NBA teams have moving forward under the new collective bargaining agreement and the new TV rights deal. But here's the interesting thing about Beal and the Wizards. I think that two things can be true. I think that Bradley Beal can be a player that's all about winning and about competing and staying competitive and playing for a competitive team. I think that can be true. And I think it can also be true that Bradley Beal wants to make generational wealth, and he recognizes what's at stake. And he's got a chance to earn $250 million signing this deal. And I don't think that one necessarily detracts from the other. I don't think that if Bradley Beal were to sign the Supermax, then it justifies people saying he's not all about winning and he's not all about competing. I think that it would be a mistake to categorize Bradley Beal in this fashion if he were to sign the Supermax, because he's got a chance to earn $250 million. I don't think you or I, or perhaps 99.9% of the world's population can even quantify, compute, or comprehend what that type of money is and what that's worth. So for us to criticize and to judge him, this would be the most prudent and pragmatic decision he could make. It's an easy choice. You sign the max, you take that money. Without question. Without question. You don't even think, you don't hesitate at all. But I don't think that's the real question at play here. I don't think the question is, would it be a mistake for Bradley Beal to commit himself to an organization that hasn't necessarily proven that it can operate at a championship level, or that they've surrounded Beal with the requisite pieces for him to compete for an NBA title. I don't think that the question should be, should Bradley Beal, would it be a mistake for Bradley Beal to hitch his wagon, to an organization like the Wizards? I think the question, the real question, the bigger question, the more important one to ask is, would it be a mistake for the Wizards to offer Bradley Beal this max extension? That's really the question here, because when I look at Bradley Beal, I love Bradley Beal. I appreciate and admire his loyalty. I think that he is a tremendous, tremendous talent. He has really ascended and has blossomed into his own over the last several years in particular. I'm all about player empowerment. I'm all about equitable compensation. And I'm all about NBA players and athletes in general making the most money that they possibly can. And I want that trend to continue. But do I truly think that Bradley Beal is one of those select guys that is truly worth a max deal for $248 million, essentially paying him $50 million per year? Do I think he's really that type of player? I'm not sure. And quite frankly, I don't know if he is. I think there are only a handful of NBA players that truly are worth a max of that magnitude. I'm talking about $50 million per year. Maybe there's only 10 guys like that. You have LeBron, you got KD, you got Steph, you got Giannis, you got Luka, Kawhi, Nikola Jokic, Embiid, and maybe Damian Lillard. That's 9 guys right there. I think that there are several guys that I would stomach paying that much money. I think guys like Jason Tatum, Ja Morant. I think that guys like Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Trae Young, Zion Williamson, Bradley Beal, they fall under that next category of guys who, would I stomach paying that type of money to? Probably. From a talent perspective, Kyrie. From a long-term perspective, clearly not. That's what the Nets are showing us right now. So I think Bradley Beal can be lumped into that next category of guys who, could I stomach paying that type of money to? Probably. But do I really think, without any hesitation, is worth that type of money? I'm not sure if he really is. And really, thanks to Ben Simmons and others and the amount of latitude that they have and they have operated with, we can really thank them, because I wouldn't be surprised if Bradley Beal signs a Supermax and then comes around and the next season demands a trade from the Wizards. Now, his personality doesn't seem to be tailored to do something like that. To his credit, Bradley Beal seems like a stand-up guy. He seems like someone that is true to his word. And again, it could be that the situation calls for, after a season, it's just not the right fit in Washington. And it wouldn't necessarily just be as simple as, okay, he wanted his money and then wanted to leave. He could have left several years ago. But I think that when you look at Bradley Beal and you look at his career, 10 years in the NBA, was the 3rd overall pick in the 2012 NBA draft, was an all-NBA rookie team selection when he entered the league. He's been a 3-time All-Star. 1 time he's been an all-NBA 3rd team selection in 10 seasons. So far, he's having a stellar career. But as far as the max, $248 million, is he the type of player that's capable of being a franchise player that can legitimately lead you to the postseason and to competing for a title year in and year out? I don't know if he's proven that he's capable of being that guy. The Wizards have never gone past the first round of the playoffs since 2017. In fact, only 1 time in his career has Bradley Beal advanced to the 2nd round of the postseason. And not all of it's been his fault. He's tried to carry and lead the team as best as he could. And he's been a stable player in the NBA and is truly, I think, one of the best kind of complementary pieces. I think that if he were to be a number 2 on a team, you pair him with, again, a Luka or one of these upper echelon guys, well, I don't think it's a slight on him, and that makes that team very formidable. But if he is your number 1 player, which we have to treat the Supermax like that, we have to say, if you're being signed to the Supermax, then you are one of those top 10 to 12 guys, 15 guys, perhaps most, that can nearly single-handedly lead a team to the postseason and to a championship. And I don't know if Bradley Beal is that guy. He's an excellent player. And obviously, if you're the Wizards, I think ultimately you should offer him the Supermax. I would recommend that they do that. Whether or not you have your hesitations and your reservations, which are totally valid, I would offer it to him, but it is a question. It is a question because they traded for Kristaps mid-season. They obviously just drafted Johnny Davis, number 10, out of my alma mater, the University of Wisconsin, to be in the backcourt with him. I think Johnny Davis is going to be a great NBA player. I love his makeup. I think that he'll fit well with Bradley Beal. Obviously, you've got some depth with Kuzma and KCP and Roy Hachimura. And you've got the Israeli guy, Danny Avdija. We'll see what he ends up turning into. They've got some pieces, but do I think it's really enough to compete legitimately in the Eastern Conference? Probably not. But again, if you're Bradley Beal, obviously you sign this. And I think that if you're the Wizards, you kind of just close your eyes, you make him this offer, and you hope that it pans out. But I do think that it warrants the question of should the Wizards offer him this type of max deal? And I think that's the question. That's the really interesting story to follow and to see what they ultimately do. By the way, Wimbledon is going to be starting this week. I believe this morning was the first series of first round matchups for the All England Club Grand Slam. It's perhaps my favorite tennis tournament of the year. It's a shame that we won't get a chance to see some of the Russian and the Belarusian players play and participate, because Wimbledon has prohibited players of those nationalities from playing due to the war in Ukraine. So it's a shame we won't be able to see some of these tremendous players like Medvedev, who's world number 1, but there's still plenty of other incredible storylines. Serena Williams is back playing for the first time in a year. In fact, Wimbledon 2021 was the last time that we saw Serena Williams, so she's going to be back. It'll be fascinating to track her journey and her tournament. I'm going to be talking a lot about it, not only on Wednesday, but in the upcoming show. So cannot wait to follow Wimbledon, but it's going to be tremendous tournament. Okay. Final topic, my Malkin's moments. I have a couple great Malkin's moments for you, and really I could have dedicated a whole segment to it, but the Colorado Avalanche, congratulations to them. They won the Stanley Cup last night. They defeated the two-time back-to-back defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games, culminating in the 2-1 victory on the road in Game 6 last night to clinch. It's their third Stanley Cup in franchise history, 1996, 2001, and 2022. Obviously, 2001 was the last Stanley Cup title that they won. This was a team that trailed, by the way, 1-0 in Game 6 on the road. They scored 2 unanswered goals to win. And I think that what's impressive about what the Avalanche have done that is going to be overlooked, and I think kind of glossed over, is as much as we as sports fans often compliment teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning that have maintained a tremendous level of consistency, and I think that they deserve a boatload of credit for returning to the Stanley Cup for the 3rd consecutive season. Think about all the teams gunning and vying for their head, vying for their position. And they displayed that heart of a champion, going on the road in Game 5, winning 3-2, denying and preventing the Avalanche from raising that Stanley Cup trophy on their home ice, forcing a Game 6 back in Tampa Bay. That hurdle alone for the Avalanche to overcome was tremendous. It was absolutely tremendous to knock out the champs, to do it on the road. It was certainly fitting for the Avalanche to close out this series and to win the Stanley Cup on the road. They've been absolutely fantastic on the road throughout this entire postseason. In fact, all postseason, They were overall 9-1 on the road in the postseason, and they completed all 4 of their series on the road. They never clinched a series at home this whole postseason. They clinched every postseason round on the road. And that speaks to the resiliency, that speaks to how well coached that they've been. Obviously, this is a team whose core had been through the grind, had experienced the up and downs. They had experienced 3 straight second-round playoff exits in the 3 seasons prior to this season. Cale Makar won the MVP. He was obviously tremendous. 8 goals this postseason, 29 points in 20 postseason games. He won the Norris Trophy for the best defenseman in the NHL this entire season. Then he obviously just was named the Conn Smythe MVP winner of the postseason. He's just 23 years of age, and what he was doing was absolutely tremendous. And I think that you combine the productivity you got from him with McKinnon and Landeskog and Johnson, some of these guys who have been integral pieces of the Avalanche for several years, and it culminates in this fashion. They've been tremendous all season. They've arguably been the best team in the NHL all year, if not a top 3 team in the NHL all season. And when you look at Adam Makar, for example, he became just the 3rd defenseman to ever to win both the Norris and the Conn Smythe winner since the Pro Hockey Writers Association began tracking tabs 5 years ago. And this was a team that just during the 2016-2017 season, think about that, 6 years ago, this was a Colorado Avalanche team that had the worst record in the NHL. They literally had experienced rock bottom. And it's the ultimate redemptive story of them kind of climbing up this mountain. Just climbing up one season at a time from all the way at the bottom of the mountain to the top of Everest. And it's a tremendous, tremendous story. They've had a tremendous season and deserve a ton of credit for it. And congratulations on their franchise's 3rd Stanley Cup final. I haven't talked about it as much or not nearly enough on Morning Joe, but it was a tremendous year in the NHL, and they deserve to be the champs. And speaking of deserving to be the champs, in college baseball, Ole Miss officially won the men's College World Series. They swept the Oklahoma Sooners in 2 games. They won 10-3 in game 1, and then yesterday they won 4-2. They also came back. They were down 2-1 in the top of the 8th, and they plated 3 runs in the top half of that 8th inning. And what's amazing, again, this obviously took place in Omaha, Nebraska. That's the home of the College World Series. This is an Ole Miss team that already chartered their own path. They became the first College World Series team to hit 3 consecutive home runs. We saw that in game 1 in their 10-3 victory since 1998. Again, they won 10-3, and at one point they hit 3 consecutive home runs, just the sheer dominance of this team. This was the first national championship for the Rebels ever. For the men's team with their championship, they won their first officially recognized men's national championship in anything since 1893, which is when they fielded their first men's football program. So talk about an unbelievable moment for the university as a whole. This was a team that started out the year ranked number 1. They dropped precipitously, going 7-14 in the SEC. Their head coach was on the hot seat. They were one of the last 4 teams in to even make the 64-team playoff. In fact, they had to beat North Carolina State to receive the final at-large bid just to get in to the tournament. They played every single series on the road. in the regionals, the super regionals. They had to go to the road, on the road for every single game. And they became the 8th national champion since 2009 to come out of the SEC. In fact, teams in the SEC have now won 3 consecutive College World Series, Ole Miss becoming the latest. And the Rebels, this is a team that finished the year 20-6, including 10-1 in this national tournament. They were absolutely on fire. And it was fitting that they started out the year ranked number 1. They finished the year ranked number 1. And it was an unconventional path. They took a little bit more of a circuitous route to get here. But the fact of the matter is they became the first team to win a championship game when trailing after 7 innings since LSU did it in 2000 against Stanford. And Sunday's contest was also the first game in this year's Men's College World Series to feature multiple lead changes. So much history was at stake. And Ole Miss, what a season they had, and congratulations to their men's program. The Rebels, I don't want to say they were a little bit rebellious this year, but they certainly had a run for the ages and deserve a boatload of credit for that. That's all the time that I got for today, ending a little bit early today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter, at Jonah_Malkin, or at morning_Joe_JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thanks so much, and as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.